The thing about diplomatic postings, Marcus Webb had learned, was that most of your time was spent being politely bored in increasingly elaborate locations. Currently, he was being politely bored in what might be the most stunning palace in known space, the Zyrathi Imperial Complex, a structure that had been built and rebuilt over 3,000 years, each era adding layers until the result was architectural chaos that somehow worked. Crystal spires rose alongside ancient stone towers. Gardens floated on anti-gravity platforms next to courtyards that predated human spaceflight, and corridors twisted through the complex in patterns that suggested the palace had been designed by committee across multiple centuries. The Unity Festival was in full swing, which meant those corridors were packed with representatives from every species allied with the Zyrathi Empire. Marcus pressed himself against a wall as a delegation of Thenari passed, their insectoid frames requiring more vertical space than the hallway comfortably provided. Somewhere ahead, he could hear the musical language of the Velkari mixing with the harmonic tones of the collective, creating soundscape his translator struggled to parse. He'd been trying to reach the human delegation's assigned seating for the past 20 minutes, but kept getting turned around in the palace's labyrinth. His credentials said the afternoon cultural presentations were in the Hall of Luminous Heritage, but he'd passed 3 different halls with similar names and wasn't confident he knew which was correct. "Move along, please, clear the intersection," someone was announcing in Zyrathi, the translator rendering it with formal politeness. Marcus pushed toward what he hoped was the right direction, caught in a current of beings much taller than his 6 feet, all trying to navigate the bottleneck where 3 major corridors converged. He'd studied the briefing materials extensively. The Zyrathi were ancient empire, their people marked by long pointed ears and skin tones ranging from deep bronze to pale gold, organized in strict hierarchical social structures where bloodlines mattered immensely. Proper etiquette required not making direct eye contact with nobility unless addressed, maintaining respectful distance, using formal titles, and definitely not touching anyone without clear permission. Physical contact in their culture carried significant meaning. Marcus had zero intention of violating any of those protocols. Then someone behind him, something large and apparently in a hurry, shoved past with enough force that Marcus stumbled forward directly into the person ahead of him. The collision was brief but definite. His chest hit her back, his hands instinctively reaching out and gripping her shoulders to stop himself from completely bowling her over, the two of them frozen for a heartbeat in contact that his brain registered as inappropriate even before his cultural training caught up. He scrambled backward, hands releasing immediately, already forming apologies. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean. Someone pushed and I lost my balance, I apologize for." The words died as he actually looked at the person he'd run into. She was Zyrathi, definitely. Those elegant pointed ears rising from dark hair arranged in complex braids, skin a warm gold that seemed to catch the corridor's light. She wore ceremonial robes in deep purple and silver, fabric that looked like it cost more than Marcus's annual salary, with jewelry at her throat and wrists that suggested very high rank. And she was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read, shock, maybe, or anger, or something else entirely. Around them, the corridor had gone silent. Other beings had stopped moving, were staring at them with expressions Marcus definitely recognized. Horror, fascination, concern. Someone made a sound that his translator rendered as a sharp intake of breath. "I am so incredibly sorry," Marcus tried again, bowing in what he desperately hoped was appropriately respectful manner. "That was completely accidental. I meant no disrespect. I was pushed and lost my balance." Before he could finish, guards appeared. They seemed to materialize from the crowd, armored Zyrathi warriors moving with precision that suggested serious training, placing themselves between Marcus and the woman, their hands moving to weapons at their sides. Marcus's stomach dropped into his shoes. "Credentials," one of the guards demanded, his tone making it clear this was not a request. Marcus fumbled for his diplomatic pass, his mind racing through every cultural briefing trying to figure out exactly what he'd done wrong and how severe the consequences were. Physical contact without permission was a violation. He knew that, but how bad was it? Had he committed assault? Was this a criminal matter or just a cultural offense? The woman, because he was becoming increasingly certain she was someone very important based on the guard's protective positioning, and the way everyone else had backed away, raised one hand in a gesture that made the guards immediately stand down. She spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the musical quality of high Xyrathi but with undertones of absolute authority. "Bring him to the private audience chamber. I wish to speak with this human." The guards exchanged glances but didn't argue. One stepped forward, not quite grabbing Marcus but making clear through proximity that he was expected to come along. "Of course, Your Highness," the guard said, and Marcus felt his anxiety spike even higher. "Your Highness. Not a minor noble, not even a major noble, royalty. He just accidentally assaulted Xyrathi royalty." As he was escorted through corridors that were suddenly much emptier, the crowd parting for the guards and their charge, Marcus replayed the moment in his mind. The collision, the brief contact, his hands on her shoulders. In human culture, it would be nothing, an accident requiring an apology but not a diplomatic incident. In Xyrathi culture, apparently, it was something much more significant. They arrived at a chamber Marcus definitely hadn't seen in any of the palace maps provided to the diplomatic delegations. The guards ushered him inside, and he found himself in a space that was smaller than the grand halls but somehow more intimidating. Intimate, elegantly decorated, clearly designed for private conversations rather than public ceremonies. The woman from the corridor was already there, having apparently used a faster route. She'd removed the outer layers of her ceremonial robes, revealing simpler but still clearly expensive garments underneath. Without the formal outerwear, Marcus could see her more clearly. She looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s by human standards, though he knew Xyrathi aging didn't map directly to human. Her bearing suggested someone comfortable with authority, but her eyes, gold, catching the light like precious metal, held an expression he couldn't quite interpret. The guards positioned Marcus in the center of the room and then retreated to positions flanking the door. Not leaving, just giving the impression of privacy while making clear that intervention was available if needed. The woman studied Marcus for a long moment, her gaze cataloging details. He tried to maintain respectful posture without direct eye contact, falling back on his diplomatic training even though his heart was racing. "State your name and position," she said, her tone formal but not actively hostile. "Ambassador Marcus Webb, Earth Diplomatic Corps, assigned to the Unity Festival delegation," Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Your Highness, I sincerely apologize for the collision. It was entirely accidental. Someone in the crowd pushed me from behind and I lost my balance. I meant absolutely no disrespect or offense." "Did you know who I am when you touched me?" she asked, the question phrased oddly. "No, Your Highness. I had no idea. I didn't even see you clearly until after the contact. I was just trying not to fall." She exchanged a glance with one of the guards, something passing between them in a look Marcus couldn't decipher. "I am Crown Princess Zaralyn Tel Xyrathi," she said, her voice carrying that same casual authority from before. "First heir to the eternal throne, supreme commander of the Imperial fleet, voice of the dynasty in the Council of Stars." Each title landed like a stone. Marcus felt his already low stomach drop further. He hadn't just run into royalty, he'd run into the Crown Princess, the future Empress, possibly the single most important person on this entire planet. "I am so incredibly, profoundly sorry," he managed. "I had no intention." She waved him to silence. In Xyrathi culture, physical contact between man and woman who are not family or bonded partners is considered intimate gesture. Contact requires either formal permission or established relationship. Touching someone of royal blood without invitation is legally classified as assault, carrying penalties ranging from imprisonment to exile, depending on circumstances and intent. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. "Your Highness, I swear it was an accident." "I believe you," she interrupted. "Your reaction was clearly surprise and horror, not the calculated boldness of someone making deliberate gesture, which creates interesting situation." She settled into a chair with fluid grace, gesturing to another chair across from her. Marcus was too nervous to sit, remained standing with what he hoped was respectful posture. "If I report this as assault," Zarelin continued, "you will be punished according to our laws. Imprisonment, certainly. Potential exile from Zyrathi space, possible damage to Earth's diplomatic standing. If I report it as unwanted courtship advance, which physical contact from unknown man could be interpreted as, the result is similar, though perhaps with different emotional valence." "I wasn't making a courtship advance," Marcus said quickly. "I genuinely just lost my balance." "I know, but perception matters in court politics." She leaned forward slightly. "However, there is third interpretation. I could choose to view your action as bold but acceptable gesture from foreign dignitary unfamiliar with our customs. Cultural misunderstanding rather than intentional offense. And if I chose to find your directness intriguing rather than insulting, well, that is my prerogative as the party who was contacted." Marcus's brain struggled to process this. "I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, Your Highness." "I am saying that I have the authority to interpret this incident however I choose. And I find myself curious about the human who literally ran into me, and then looked at me with genuine horror rather than political calculation." She tilted her head slightly, her ears adjusting in a way that suggested she was evaluating him. "Tell me, Ambassador Webb, what were your thoughts in that moment of contact, before the panic set in?" The question was so unexpected that Marcus answered honestly before he could think better of it. "I thought you were beautiful. Your robes were stunning, your jewelry was exquisite, and when I looked at your face I was struck by how—" He stopped himself, realizing how this sounded. "That sounds terrible, doesn't it? Like I'm making excuses for inappropriate behavior." "On the contrary," Zarelin said, and there was definitely amusement in her voice now. "It sounds like genuine reaction rather than rehearsed flattery." "Continue." "I just noticed you were very striking," Marcus said weakly. "Impressive, really. And then I noticed I just physically collided with someone clearly very important and started planning my defense against assault charges." "Striking," the princess repeated, testing the word. "Not beautiful, lovely, radiant, the common diplomatic flatteries I hear constantly." "All of those too," Marcus admitted, "but striking seemed more accurate. You have a presence that's hard to ignore, even in a crowded corridor full of people trying to get somewhere." Zarelin smiled, small, controlled expression but genuine amusement. "I have decided," she announced both to Marcus and the guards, "that Ambassador Webb's actions were cultural misunderstanding, not intended offense. He will not be charged or punished. Instead," she looked directly at Marcus, "I am choosing to interpret his accidental contact as bold if unintentional courtship gesture. He touched me as if I were not royalty, but simply a woman who caught his attention. I find this refreshing." One of the guards made a sound that might have been surprise or concern. "Your Highness," Marcus ventured carefully, "I appreciate that interpretation, but I should be clear. I wasn't actually trying to make any kind of courtship gesture. I really was just falling." "I know, that is part of what makes it interesting." She stood, indicating the conversation was approaching conclusion. "Ambassador Webb, you will attend the royal banquet tonight as my personal guest. I wish to speak with you further, in less chaotic setting than crowded corridor." Marcus's mind reeled. "Your Highness, I'm honored, but I'm not sure." "It is not a request," she said, though her tone was amused rather than commanding. "An ambassador, Try not to collide with anyone else. It might create complications. The guards escorted him out, and Marcus walked back toward the human delegation's quarters in a daze. He'd gone from diplomatic incident to royal banquet invitation in less than an hour, and he had absolutely no idea what had just happened. Behind him, in the private audience chamber, one of the guards spoke quietly to the princess. "Your Highness, this will cause problems with the court. Lord Kelter will not be pleased to see you showing attention to an outsider." "Lord Kelter," Zarelin said calmly, "will have to adjust his expectations. I am tired of being treated as political object rather than person with preferences. The human touched me by accident and reacted with genuine concern rather than political maneuvering. That simple honesty is worth more than 1,000 calculated courtship gestures. The nobles will not see it that way. The nobles rarely see anything beyond their own political advantages." She moved to the window, looking out over the palace grounds. "For once in my life, I am making a choice based on personal interest rather than political necessity. The court can adjust or complain. I find I do not particularly care which." The guard bowed and retreated, and Zarelin stood alone in the chamber, thinking about gold-brown human eyes looking at her with surprise and attraction, treating her like a person rather than a title. She smiled. This was going to be complicated. She was looking forward to it. The human delegation's quarters were in a state of controlled chaos when Marcus returned. "Where have you been?" Ambassador Chen demanded the moment he walked through the door. "The cultural presentation started 20 minutes ago, and someone said you were involved in an incident with—" She stopped, staring at him. "Marcus, why do you look like you've been sentenced to execution?" "I ran into the crown princess," Marcus said, his voice flat with residual shock. "Literally, physically collided with her in a crowded corridor." The room went silent. 3 other members of the human delegation, junior diplomats and cultural attachés, all turned to stare at him with identical expressions of horror. "You touched Zyrathi royalty." Chen's voice had gone very quiet in the way that suggested she was suppressing the urge to scream. "Marcus, please tell me you're joking." "I wish I were." Marcus collapsed into a chair. "Someone pushed me in the crowd, I lost my balance, ran straight into her. Grabbed her shoulders trying not to fall. It was completely accidental, but apparently that doesn't matter much in Zyrathi culture." "Did they arrest you?" asked Jenna Park, one of the junior diplomats. "Please tell me they didn't arrest our delegation's representative." "Worse, the princess invited me to the royal banquet tonight as her personal guest." The room's silence somehow got more intense. "That's worse than arrest?" Jenna asked carefully. "The royal banquet is exclusive," Chen said, her expression cycling through several emotions Marcus couldn't quite track. "Only highest-ranking dignitaries and Zyrathi nobility attend. Humans have never been invited to one." "Marcus, what exactly did you say to her?" "I apologized profusely and told her she was striking," Marcus said. "And apparently she found my terrified honesty refreshing compared to whatever calculated political behavior she usually gets from people." "She found you refreshing," Chen repeated. "The crown princess of the Zyrathi Empire found a human who accidentally assaulted her refreshing." "When you say it like that, it sounds insane." "That's because it is insane." Chen ran her hands through her hair. "Okay. Okay, we need to think about this strategically. You being invited to the royal banquet elevates our diplomatic status significantly. It shows favor toward Earth, which could benefit all our ongoing negotiations. But it also puts you in the spotlight where every interaction will be scrutinized by people who have been playing political games since before Earth had spaceflight." "I got that impression from the guards' reactions," Marcus said. "They looked like I'd just thrown a grenade into carefully balanced political arrangements." "You probably did." Chen started pacing. "The Zyrathi court is extremely hierarchical. Ancient noble families, complex allegiances, people who have specific expectations about who should have access to the princess. A human showing up as her personal guest is going to create ripples. So what do I do? You go to the banquet. You are polite, respectful, and you try very hard not to cause any more diplomatic incidents. Chen stopped pacing to look at him directly. And Marcus, be very, very careful. The princess may find you refreshing, but that doesn't mean the rest of the court will be friendly. You're an outsider disrupting their social order. They will not like it. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. The human delegation's cultural advisor, Dr. Kenji Tanaka, provided a crash course in royal banquet etiquette. Which utensils to use in what order, how to address various ranks of nobility, which topics were safe for conversation, and which were political minefields. By the time Marcus was dressed in formal diplomatic attire, the closest thing humans had to the elaborate robes the Sci-Fi favored, his head was spinning with rules and protocols. Just remember, Kenji said as Marcus prepared to leave, the Sci-Fi value composure above almost everything else. Stay calm, show respect, and don't let anyone provoke you into emotional reactions. They'll test you to see if you're worth the princess's attention. No pressure then. None whatsoever. The royal banquet was held in a hall that made Marcus feel like an insect in a cathedral. The space rose at least 50 feet to a vaulted ceiling covered in bioluminescent murals depicting Sci-Fi history. Long tables arranged in precise geometric patterns filled the floor, each position carefully assigned based on rank and political alliance. Everything was choreographed to the smallest detail. An attendant guided Marcus to his seat, which turned out to be at the royal table itself, just 3 positions down from where an empty chair waited for Princess Zaralyn. The other occupants of the table were all Sci-Fi nobility, their elaborate robes and jewelry indicating ancient bloodlines and significant power. They regarded Marcus with expressions ranging from polite curiosity to barely concealed hostility. "Ambassador Webb," one of them said, her tone perfectly neutral. "How unexpected to see a human at the royal table. I am Lady Cyrnal of House Tyrathi. You are quite far from your assigned seating, I believe." "I was invited by Her Highness," Marcus replied carefully, trying to remember Kenji's coaching about not being defensive. "How interesting," another noble said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. "The princess does occasionally take interest in unusual specimens. I am Lord Karshan. Tell me, Ambassador, how does one merit such an invitation?" "By being in the wrong place at the wrong time," Marcus said honestly. "I accidentally collided with Her Highness in a crowded corridor. She was gracious enough to interpret it as cultural misunderstanding rather than offense." The nobles exchanged glances that suggested this story had already spread through the court in various versions. "Collided with her," Lord Karshan repeated. "How bold." Before Marcus could respond, a ceremonial announcement rang through the hall, and everyone stood in synchronized motion. Princess Zaralyn entered through the main archway, flanked by guards and attendants, moving through the space with the kind of practiced grace that came from a lifetime of formal events. She was stunning in formal regalia, robes in deep purple and silver that seemed to capture and reflect light, jewelry at her throat and ears that Marcus suspected was worth more than most planets' GDP. Her dark hair was arranged in elaborate braids woven with silver thread, and her bearing communicated absolute authority. But when her eyes found Marcus among the assembled nobility, during the third course, Princess Zaralyn turned to him with a question that made nearby conversations pause. "Tell me, Ambassador Webb, what do humans think of the concept of arranged marriage for political alliance?" The question was clearly not random small talk. Marcus carefully set down his utensil and formulated his response, aware that every word was being analyzed. "Humans practiced similar customs historically," he said, "particularly among nobility and ruling families. It's fallen out of favor in recent centuries, though. We generally believe individuals should have the right to choose their own partners now, though we understand that different cultures have different values around duty and family obligations. And if someone born to significant duty wished to choose differently than tradition dictated, Zaralyn pressed, what would humans think of that? Every noble at the table was listening now, this conversation clearly carrying weight beyond its surface meaning. I think, Marcus said carefully, that humans would generally support individual choice. But we also recognize that when someone holds significant responsibility, their personal choices can have broader implications. It's a difficult balance between personal happiness and duty to others. A diplomatic answer, Zaralyn noted. But what do you personally believe? If someone in my position wished to select a partner based on personal connection rather than political advantage, would that be selfish or brave? The table had gone completely silent. Marcus realized this wasn't hypothetical. The princess was making some kind of statement, using him as her sounding board for ideas that apparently challenged Zyrathi norms. He could give another diplomatic non-answer, or he could be honest, the way he'd been honest when they first met. I think, he said slowly, that people who carry the weight of leadership deserve happiness too. That maybe the best leaders are ones who understand personal fulfillment, not just duty. But I'm probably not qualified to comment on Zyrathi royal protocols. On the contrary, Zaralyn said, her voice carrying across the table, you are perfectly qualified to comment as someone outside our system, someone who sees me as person rather than just royal position. That perspective has value I cannot get from those who have been trained since birth to view everything through lens of political advantage. Lord Karshan cleared his throat, his expression carefully controlled but his tone carrying an edge. Your Highness surely does not value the opinions of outsiders over the wisdom of the court, and your advisors who have served your family for generations. I value diverse perspectives, Zaralyn responded, her voice cool. And I find that those who have no political stake in my decisions often provide more honest counsel than those hoping to benefit from influencing them. The comment landed like a thrown knife. Lord Karshan's ears flattened slightly. Marcus had learned this was a Zyrathi sign of displeasure, but he didn't press the argument. The rest of the banquet proceeded with Marcus acutely aware that he'd become a focal point of court attention he didn't want and didn't understand. The princess continued to direct conversation toward him, asking about human courtship customs, Earth's diplomatic philosophy, his own background and interests. Each question seemed designed to make a point to the watching nobility. When the formal banquet ended and guests began to disperse to various social gatherings happening throughout the palace, Zaralyn caught Marcus's eye and made a small gesture. Not quite a command, but definitely an invitation. He followed, aware of the stares and whispered comments trailing them, and they ended up in a private garden terrace overlooking the palace city. The view was stunning, lights spreading out below them in patterns that suggested the city had grown organically over millennia. Guards maintained positions at the terrace entrance but gave them space. You handled that well, Zaralyn said once they had relative privacy. Thank you for not making me regret inviting you. I'm not entirely sure what just happened in there, Marcus admitted, but I got the impression I was somehow a prop in a larger conversation. Perceptive, she leaned against the terrace railing looking out at the city. The Zyrathi court has very specific expectations for who I should marry. Ancient noble families with proper bloodlines, political alliances that strengthen the empire, matches that have been discussed since I was a child. What they do not expect is that I might wish to choose for myself. Understanding clicked into place, and I represent the possibility of different choice. You represent several things. The possibility of choosing for personal connection rather than political calculation. The disruption of carefully laid plans that assume I will simply accept what has been decided for me. And she turned to look at him directly. You represent someone who looked at me and saw a person he found attractive, not a crown he might gain access to. Your Highness, I should be clear. I'm not trying to get involved in court politics or become a pawn in someone's power play. But I know that is part of your appeal. She smiled. I am not asking you to be anything other than what you are. I am simply tired of being treated as a political object rather than a person with preferences and desires. And when you ran into me, literally, and reacted with genuine horror and attraction rather than calculated political maneuvering, it reminded me that there are people who can see past the crown. Marcus processed this, understanding the loneliness in her words. For what it's worth, when I looked at you in that moment, I didn't see royalty. I saw someone beautiful who I just accidentally assaulted, and I was mostly worried about whether I'd caused an interstellar incident. Zarelyn laughed, genuine, surprised sound that transformed her face from regal to simply lovely. You did cause an incident, just not the kind you feared. She sobered, her expression becoming more serious. I should warn you, the court will not like this. They will see you as threat to their carefully arranged political plans. Your presence at the banquet as my personal guest has already started speculation and opposition. Should I be worried? Possibly, but I find I am enjoying the disruption too much to send you away. She extended her hand, formal gesture, palm up, in what Marcus had learned was a Xyrathi invitation to connection. Would you be willing to spend time with me during the remainder of the festival, not as political arrangement, but as two people getting to know each other? Marcus looked at her offered hand, at the hope beneath her royal composure, at the person behind the crown who was asking for the simple freedom to choose her own company. He knew this was probably a terrible idea. Knew he was getting involved in situations way above his diplomatic authority. Knew that whatever was developing here would have complications he couldn't begin to predict. But he also knew that Zarelyn's smile made something in his chest warm, that their conversation had been the most genuine interaction he'd had since arriving at this festival, that she was looking at him like he mattered as a person, rather than just a diplomatic function. I'd like that, he said, taking her offered hand. The contact was warm, her skin surprisingly soft despite her warrior bearing. Though I should warn you, I'm probably going to keep accidentally committing cultural offenses. I'm still learning. That is acceptable, Zarelyn said, her fingers curving around his. I find your cultural offenses refreshing. They remind me that there are ways of being beyond the rigid protocols I have been trained to follow. They stood together on the terrace, hands clasped, while somewhere in the palace depths, the Xyrathi court began adjusting to the unprecedented situation of their crown princess showing interest in a human who literally stumbled into her life. Marcus had no idea what he was getting into, but holding Zarelyn's hand, feeling the genuine warmth of her smile, he found he was willing to find out. The following days transformed Marcus's experience of the Unity Festival from formal diplomatic tedium to something entirely different and far more complicated. Princess Zarelyn, it turned out, had both the authority and the inclination to restructure her schedule around spending time with him. What should have been carefully choreographed diplomatic events became opportunities for connection, often in ways that scandalized the court. She invited him to a cultural presentation on Xyrathi traditional music, where they sat together discussing the complex harmonic structures, while nearby nobles watched with barely concealed disapproval. She included him in a private tour of the palace archives, sharing Xyrathi history with enthusiasm that made her seem younger and less burdened by her position. She arranged for them to attend a performance of traditional dance, and had to quietly explain the significance of various movements and costumes, while their heads bent close together in conversation that made the surrounding nobility visibly uncomfortable. Through it all, Marcus was aware of the scrutiny. Lord Karshan and several other high-ranking nobles made their displeasure known through pointed comments about humans not understanding Xyrathi culture, about the inappropriateness of the princess spending so much time with someone so far outside her social sphere, about the disruption to long-standing expectations. On the third day, Ambassador Chen pulled Marcus aside with an expression that mixed concern and fascination. "We need to talk," she said, steering him to a private alcove away from the festival's main events. "Specifically, about what you're doing with the crown princess." "We're spending time together," Marcus said. "Talking, attending events, nothing inappropriate." "That's not what I'm worried about." Chen lowered her voice. "Marcus, the princess is engaged. Not officially announced yet, but there's been an understanding with Lord Kelter's family for years. This was supposed to be the festival where they formalized it. Your presence is disrupting carefully laid political plans." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "She's engaged, she didn't mention." "Because she's using you to avoid an arrangement she doesn't want," Chen interrupted. "Which, personally, I think is brave. But Marcus, these people don't mess around with political tradition. The Xyrathi court has operated on the same hierarchical principles for thousands of years. You need to understand what you're walking into." "What do you mean?" Chen pulled up her data tablet, showing him intelligence briefings about Xyrathi political structures. "Lord Kelter is from one of the most powerful noble families. The marriage alliance between his house and the royal family has been discussed since Zaralyn was 15. It's supposed to consolidate power, strengthen political coalitions, ensure stability across several colonial regions. Breaking that arrangement would have massive repercussions. And she's using me as her excuse to break it," Marcus said, the pieces clicking together. "Or she's using you as proof that she deserves the choice," Chen corrected. "I don't think she's being manipulative. I think she genuinely enjoys your company. But you need to be aware that your relationship with her, whatever it is, has political dimensions you can't ignore." That evening, Marcus and Zaralyn had dinner in a private chamber, one of many scattered throughout the palace for exactly this kind of quiet conversation away from the court's constant observation. The guards were outside, the attendants had been dismissed, and for the first time since the festival began, they had something approaching actual privacy. "You've heard about Lord Kelter," Zaralyn said without preamble as they settled at the table. "I should have told you sooner." "It would have been useful information," Marcus agreed carefully. "Though I'm guessing it's complicated." "Extremely complicated." She set down her utensils, looking at him directly. "The arrangement has been understood since I was 15 years old. Kelter is an appropriate match by every traditional measure. Ancient bloodline, strong political connections, acceptable to all major court factions. The expectation has always been that this festival would see our formal engagement announced." "What changed?" "I did." Zaralyn's voice was quiet but firm. "I have spent 20 years being prepared for a marriage I did not choose to someone I do not love. I accepted it as my duty, as what my position required. Then you literally ran into me, looked at me with genuine surprise and attraction, treated me like a woman you found interesting rather than a royal obligation. And I realized I did not want to spend my life with someone who sees me as political asset. So I'm your excuse to avoid the engagement," Marcus said, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Initially, perhaps. But the more time we spend together, the more I find I genuinely enjoy your company." She reached across the table, taking his hand in a gesture that had become familiar over the past days. "You make me laugh, Marcus. You ask about my interests, not my political positions. You have no agenda beyond wanting to know me as a person. Do you understand how rare that is?" "I'm starting to," Marcus said. He looked at their joined hands, at the hope in her expression. "But Zaralyn, I'm a mid-level diplomat from a species that's barely relevant on the galactic stage. You're the crown princess of an ancient empire. That's not a minor obstacle too, whatever this is. I am aware of the obstacles. I'm also aware that I have spent my entire life making decisions based on duty and political necessity. For once, I would like to make a choice based on personal happiness." Her grip on his hand tightened slightly. "The question is whether you are willing to take that risk with me." Marcus thought about the consequences, the political complications, the scrutiny. The absolute insanity of getting involved with alien royalty when he was supposed to be here representing Earth's diplomatic interests. Then he thought about how Zerlin's entire face lit up when discussing subjects she was passionate about. How comfortable he felt in her presence despite their vastly different stations. How her rare moments of vulnerability made something in his chest ache. "I'm willing," he said, "though we should probably establish some boundaries about what happens when your actual arranged fiancé finds out about this." Zerilyn smiled, not her formal royal smile but something genuine and slightly wicked. "Kelter already knows. The entire court knows. I have been deliberately public about my interest in you. It forces the issue. Either they accept that I will choose my own partner, or they must formally challenge my right to do so. And challenging a crown princess's personal decisions is politically complicated, even for ancient noble families. So you're using me as a catalyst to break your engagement. I am spending time with someone I genuinely care about, who also happens to provide cover for decisions I wanted to make anyway," she corrected. "Both things can be true." They finished dinner talking about safer topics: his childhood on Earth, her experiences training in the Imperial fleet, the cultural differences between their species that ranged from amusing to profound. But the conversation about Kelter hung between them, an acknowledged complication they'd have to address eventually. Eventually came 2 days later. Marcus was in the human delegation's quarters, reviewing diplomatic correspondence, when Ambassador Chen appeared with an urgent expression. "The princess requested your presence in the formal audience chamber," she said. "Lord Kelter has demanded a meeting with her, and she wants you there." "Why would she want me there for that?" Marcus asked, already dreading the answer. "Because she's making a statement. Come on, we don't have time to debate this." The formal audience chamber was significantly larger than the private rooms where Marcus and Zerilyn usually met. It was designed for court functions, with seating arranged to reflect hierarchy and witnesses positioned to observe official declarations. Zerilyn sat on a raised platform that wasn't quite a throne but clearly indicated her authority, flanked by advisors and guards. Lord Kelter stood in the supplicant's position, technically respectful but his bearing suggested barely controlled anger. He was tall even by Zyrathi standards, his robes indicating ancient lineage, his expression suggesting someone whose expectations have been disrupted and who is not handling it well. Marcus was positioned to the side, close enough to observe but not directly part of the proceedings. He caught Zerilyn's eye briefly and saw something that might have been apology or determination or both. "Your Highness," Kelter began, his tone formal but tight, "I have come to discuss the matter of our engagement." "There is no engagement to discuss," Zerilyn said calmly. "The understanding between our families was never formalized, and I have decided not to proceed with it." "Not to proceed." Kelter's voice rose slightly. "Your Highness, this arrangement has been discussed for 20 years. Your right to choose." Kelter turned toward where Marcus stood, his expression making clear who he blamed for this disruption. "Or your infatuation with a human who stumbled into your path. Your Highness, this is not choice. This is impulse. You are allowing a chance encounter to override years of careful planning." "Careful planning by others," Zerilyn corrected. "Not by me. I was never asked if I wanted this arrangement, Kelter. It was decided when I was a child and presented as inevitable. I am choosing differently now." "Because of him," Kelter said, gesturing toward Marcus with barely concealed contempt. "A human who has been here less than a week, who knows nothing of our culture or politics, who cannot possibly understand what being bound to the crown princess entails. Your Highness, I ask you to reconsider this rash decision before you damage relationships that have taken generations to build." Marcus watched Zerilyn's expression, saw the moment she made her decision. "I appreciate your concern," she said, "but my decision is made. The understanding between our families is dissolved by mutual agreement. You are released from any obligation to me, free to pursue other alliances." and I am free to make my own choices about companionship and partnership. Mutual agreement, Kelter repeated. You mean you are imposing your will and expecting me to accept it gracefully? I mean, Zaralyn said, her voice carrying an edge now, that if you examine your own feelings honestly, you will find you are no more enthusiastic about this arrangement than I am. You have spent years preparing to marry for political advantage, just as I have. I am offering us both freedom from that obligation. If you choose to see it as insult rather than liberation, that is your decision. Silence stretched across the chamber. Kelter's expression cycled through anger, surprise, and something that might have been reluctant consideration. You truly do not want this, he said finally, his tone less hostile. I truly do not, Zaralyn confirmed. And I suspect if you are honest with yourself, neither do you. Kelter was quiet for a long moment. Then his posture shifted, some of the rigid formality draining away. No, he said quietly. I do not. I have been dreading this union as much as preparing for it. He looked at Marcus, his expression still not friendly but less openly hostile. I do not know if your human understands what he is involving himself in, but I will not contest your decision to choose him over me. Consider the understanding dissolved, with no ill will from my family. Relief flooded Zaralyn's expression. Thank you, that is more than I had hoped for. Do not thank me. Just, Kelter paused, choose wisely. The court will not accept this easily, regardless of my family's position. You are setting a precedent that challenges everything we have been taught about duty and tradition. Perhaps it is a precedent worth setting, Zaralyn said. After Kelter left, after the advisors had been dismissed and the guards had retreated to give them relative privacy, Zaralyn beckoned Marcus closer. It is done, she said, and he could hear the exhaustion and triumph mixed in her voice. The engagement is formally dissolved. I am free to choose my own path. And what do you choose? Marcus asked. She looked at him with an expression that was part hope, part vulnerability, entirely genuine. I choose to continue getting to know the human who accidentally ran into me, and saw a woman worth pursuing rather than a crown worth manipulating. If he is willing. Marcus knew this was insane. Knew he was getting involved in galactic politics way beyond his expertise. Knew that a relationship between a human and Zyrathi royalty would be complicated on levels he couldn't begin to predict. But he also knew that Zaralyn's smile made his day better, that their conversations were the best part of this diplomatic posting, that she looked at him like he mattered, like he was important, like he was someone worth choosing despite every political reason to choose differently. I'm willing, he said, moving closer and taking both her hands. Though fair warning, I'm going to keep accidentally committing cultural offenses. I'm still learning Zyrathi protocols. Your cultural offenses are part of your charm, Zaralyn said, standing to meet him. They remind me that there are ways of being beyond the rigid structures I was raised in. She stepped closer, her height making them nearly eye to eye, and Marcus was struck again by how beautiful she was. Not in the formal, untouchable way of royal portraits, but in the genuine warmth of her expression. Marcus Webb, she said softly, you literally stumbled into my life. I am choosing to let you stay. I'm honored, Marcus said, and terrified but mostly honored. That is appropriate reaction. She smiled then, in a gesture that made the remaining guards visibly stiffen. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, a Zyrathi gesture of deep intimacy he'd read about but never expected to experience. Thank you, she whispered, for treating me like a person when we collided, for seeing me instead of just the crown. That simple moment of genuineness changed everything. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her skin against his, the significance of the gesture, the weight of what they were building. Thank you, he whispered back, for not having me arrested when I ran into you. Best diplomatic incident of my career. Her laugh was quiet but genuine, her breath warm against his face. And in that moment, in a Zyrathi palace light years from Earth, Marcus thought that maybe, Just maybe, some of the best things in life came from complete accidents in crowded corridors. The Unity Festival's final days brought unexpected developments. Word of the dissolved engagement spread through the court with predictable speed, and reactions ranged from shocked disapproval to cautious interest in how the princess would navigate this unprecedented situation. Marcus and Zarelyn spent as much time together as her duties allowed, building something that felt increasingly real despite its improbable origins. They discovered unexpected common ground. Both of them loved strategic games. Both found political maneuvering exhausting even when necessary. Both had a tendency toward dry humor that surprised people who only saw their public personas. "Tell me about your family," Zarelyn asked one afternoon as they walked through the palace's extensive gardens, guards trailing at respectful distance. "Standard human family," Marcus said. "Parents still married, one sister, all on Earth. They're proud I made it into the diplomatic corps, but also slightly baffled by what I actually do. My mother keeps asking when I'm going to get a real job that she can explain to her friends." What would she think of this? Zarelyn gestured between them, her son involved with alien royalty. "She'd probably ask if you come with a dowry and stable income," Marcus said, making Zarelyn laugh. "But seriously, I think she'd like you. She's always saying I need someone who challenges me intellectually and doesn't let me hide behind work." "You hide behind work?" "Constantly. It's my primary coping mechanism for social anxiety." "I hide behind protocol," Zarelyn admitted. "Formal rules that tell me exactly how to behave in every situation, so I never have to risk genuine emotional vulnerability." "We're quite a pair." "Yes," she agreed, taking his hand. "We are." The festival's closing ceremony was the most elaborate event yet. A massive gathering in the palace's grand amphitheater, where delegates from all allied worlds would offer formal farewells and make closing diplomatic statements. Zarelyn was required to preside, and Marcus attended as part of the human delegation rather than as her personal guest. But when the formal proceedings concluded and the princess gave her closing address, speaking about unity, cooperation, and the value of seeing beyond traditional boundaries, she looked directly at Marcus during the final lines. "We must remember," she said, her voice carrying across the amphitheater, "that the strongest alliances are built on genuine connection, not just political calculation. That sometimes the most meaningful relationships begin with unexpected encounters and grow through mutual respect and honest communication. That choosing for ourselves, when we have that privilege, is not selfish but brave." The assembled delegates understood she was making a statement beyond the words. The Zyrathi nobles in attendance had varying reactions, but Marcus noticed that some of the younger ones looked thoughtful rather than disapproving. After the ceremony, as delegates began departing for their respective worlds, Marcus found himself in the private garden terrace where he and Zarelyn had first really talked. She arrived shortly after, still in her formal regalia but moving with visible relief at being away from the public eye. "How are you feeling?" he asked as she settled beside him at the railing. "Exhausted, relieved, terrified of what comes next." She looked out at the city. "The festival is ending. You will be returning to Earth with your delegation, and I will be here, facing a court that is very unhappy with my choices." "Do you regret it?" Marcus asked quietly, breaking the engagement, disrupting the political arrangements. "Not for a moment." She turned to face him. "But I would be lying if I said I was not concerned about the future. What we have built over these days, it feels real, Marcus. But it was also built in a bubble of festival time, away from the regular pressures of our positions. When you leave, when reality returns, I do not know how we maintain this." Marcus had been thinking about the same thing. Long-distance relationships are hard even when both people are human and on the same planet, across species and light-years of space. "Is potentially impossible," Zarelyn finished. "I know. But I find I do not want to give up simply because it is difficult." "Neither do I," Marcus took her hand. So we figure it out. Communication protocols, visit schedules, whatever infrastructure we need to make this work. It won't be easy, but nothing worth having is. You are willing to try, even knowing the complications, the scrutiny, the political ramifications. I'm willing to try because you make me happy, Marcus said simply. Because our conversations are the best part of my day. Because you're brilliant and brave and you deserve someone who sees that. The complications we can figure out as we go. Zaralyn smiled, the genuine smile that transformed her whole face. I should warn you, the Zyrathi concept of romantic partnership, especially for royalty, comes with expectations and protocols you have not yet encountered. Tell me, if we pursue this formally, there will be courtship rituals, family meetings, political assessments. The court will scrutinize everything about you, your background, your qualifications, your ability to understand and navigate Zyrathi society. They will test whether you are worthy of being associated with the crown princess. That sounds terrifying. It is, but it is also the path forward, if we want to make this official rather than just a festival romance that fades once you leave. Marcus processed this, understanding the choice she was offering him. They could keep this casual, let it fade naturally when distance made it untenable, or they could commit to the complicated process of making it real, official, acknowledged by both their societies. What do you want? He asked. I want you, Zaralyn said simply. I want to see if what we have found can become something lasting. I want to choose you formally and publicly and accept whatever consequences come with that choice. Marcus felt something in his chest expand, warm and bright. Then let's do it. The formal courtship, the protocols, all of it. I'm in completely. Relief and joy flooded her expression. Truly, even knowing it will be difficult. Especially knowing it will be difficult. Nothing worth having comes easy, right? She laughed, pulling him closer. When did you become wise? Probably right around the time I ran into the most amazing woman in the galaxy, and she decided I was worth keeping despite my terrible first impression. Your first impression was perfect, Zaralyn corrected. Genuine, unplanned, completely without political calculation. It was exactly what I needed to see. They stood together on the terrace, holding each other while the city lights flickered below. And Marcus thought about the journey from diplomatic incident to something that felt remarkably like love. The following day, as the human delegation prepared to depart, Ambassador Chen pulled Marcus aside one final time. So you're really doing this, she said. Formal courtship with the crown princess. Apparently I am. Marcus, you realize this is going to change your career, possibly your entire life. You can't be a regular diplomat anymore, not when you're romantically involved with foreign royalty. Earth's diplomatic service will have to figure out what to do with you. I know, but Chen, I've spent my whole career being competent and careful and making sure I never caused problems. For once, I'm choosing something because it makes me happy, not because it's professionally safe. Chen studied him for a moment, then smiled. Good, you deserve happiness. Just promise me you'll be careful. Zyrathi court politics are no joke. I promise to try not to cause any more international incidents. That's all I can ask. The departure was bittersweet. Marcus said goodbye to the festival, to the palace, to the delegates he'd met. But the hardest goodbye was to Zaralyn, who came to see him off with a formality that didn't quite hide her emotion. This is not farewell, she said as they stood in the palace's departure bay. This is temporary separation. You will return, and we will begin the formal courtship process. I'm looking forward to it, Marcus said. Though I should probably learn more about Zyrathi courtship customs before I accidentally propose marriage or something equally binding. That would certainly expedite the process, Zaralyn said, her eyes bright with amusement. Then more seriously, Marcus, thank you for running into me, for seeing me, for choosing to stay when you could have walked away. Thank you for not having me arrested, Marcus replied. Best diplomatic incident of my career. She laughed and then, despite the watching guards and departing delegates, she pulled him close and pressed her forehead to his in that intimate Xyrathi gesture that still made his heart race. "Until we meet again," she whispered. "Until we meet again," he promised. The journey back to Earth gave Marcus plenty of time to process what had happened. He'd gone to the Unity Festival expecting routine diplomatic tedium. Instead, he'd literally stumbled into the Crown Princess, disrupted carefully laid political plans, and somehow begun a cross-species relationship that would probably be studied by xenoanthropologists for generations. His family's reaction when he explained was about what he expected. "You ran into her," his mother repeated for the third time. "Just physically collided." "In a crowded corridor," Marcus confirmed. "It was an accident." "And now you're dating her," his sister added, her tone mixing awe and amusement. "You accidentally assaulted alien royalty and she decided to date you. That's the most you thing that's ever happened." "I didn't assault her," Marcus protested. "It was a cultural misunderstanding." "A cultural misunderstanding that led to romance," his father said, looking delighted. "Marcus, your mother and I met because I spilled coffee on her in a university library. I appreciate that you've taken the family tradition of clumsy romantic beginnings to an interstellar level." Earth's diplomatic service was less amused, but recognized the opportunity. They reassigned Marcus to a specialized position focused on human Xyrathi relations, which basically meant his job was now to successfully court the Crown Princess and not cause any incidents that damaged the alliance. "No pressure," his new supervisor said. "Just don't accidentally start a war." "That seems like a low bar," Marcus replied. "You'd be surprised how many diplomats fail to clear it." The courtship process proceeded over the following months. Marcus returned to Xyrathi space for formal visits, meeting with Xaralin's family and advisors who scrutinized everything about him. He studied Xyrathi culture intensively, learned their formal protocols, navigated the complex politics of the court. It was exhausting, occasionally humiliating, and completely worth it every time he saw Xaralin smile. 6 months after the Unity Festival, Xaralin visited Earth, her first time on a human world, a diplomatic mission that conveniently allowed them time together away from the Xyrathi court's constant observation. "Your planet is beautiful," she said as they walked through a park in Geneva near the Earth diplomatic headquarters. "Chaotic but beautiful." "That describes humanity pretty well," Marcus agreed. "Chaotic but beautiful." "It describes us too," Xaralin said, taking his hand. "This relationship, this choice we made, it defies every protocol and tradition, but it is also the most genuine thing in my life." "Mine too." They stood together in the park, surrounded by humans who had no idea they were watching their species' most important diplomat hold hands with alien royalty. And Marcus thought about the journey from accidental collision to deliberate choice. "I love you," he said, speaking the words for the first time. "I probably loved you from the moment you decided I was interesting rather than just a diplomatic incident." Xaralin's face transformed with joy. "I love you as well. My court thinks I am insane for choosing a human, but they do not understand that you saw me as a person before you knew I was a princess. That matters more than any political alliance." "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now we continue building this impossible thing we have started. Now we prove that love across species and stations is not just possible but worthwhile." She pulled him closer. "Now we live the precedent we set, and hope that others will find courage in our choice." "I can do that." "Good, because you are stuck with me now."